I'm here with Tommy James of Tommy James and the Shondells, who in 1968 and 69 sold more singles than any rock band, including the Beatles. He's had 23 gold number one hits, 9 gold and platinum albums, and the man has sold more than 110 million records. Hello, Tommy.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you, too. Let me start by asking you, do you participate in home entertainment? Do you enjoy listening to music at home?
Well, yeah, I'm like everybody else. Although I find myself listening to very little rock when I'm at home. I listen to a lot of jazz.
Oh, that's interesting.
And, I'm not a terribly educated jazz fan, but I'm an enthusiastic one. So, I do a lot of writing at home, and so I unfortunately have to listen to myself a lot. But no, I'm a big music fan, and I love to listen to music at home.
Does jazz influence the way you write your music at all?
Well, I think a little bit now. It didn't used to, but I got to the point where I got very tired of the normal guitar riffs and the usual rock and roll chords, and I just started little by little adding little ninths and major sevenths and things that I really hadn't done a lot of in my writing before, and now the writing has taken on quite a different complexion. It really has.
Through your years, starting when you did quite a long while ago, you've seen a lot of changes.
I sure have.
In the industry. What do you think of how things have rolled along from 4-track to, as you said, suddenly from 4 to 26-track, and then, of course, now with digital, quote, infinite tracks?
Well, I was very lucky to see the music business sort of from a historical perspective. And a big part of that, of course, was the technology. And when I first got into the business, my first hit record, Hanky Panky, was recorded mono in a radio studio in my hometown of Niles, Michigan. And I quite literally, that was it. We did the vocals and the track at the same time. And when I got to New York a couple of years later, suddenly we were on 4-track. And there were a lot of limitations to 4-track, although I love 4-track. But you pretty much had to, as you were making a record, you had to think out the steps far in advance so that you could end up with 4 tracks with all instruments that were related to that, like all the rhythm instruments would end up on one track and all the vocals would end up on another. So you had to pretty much use a protractor and a slide rule to figure out how you were going to make the record.
Were you thinking in stereo then, or are you still thinking in
mono?
mono?
No, not really. Stereo was sort of dumped on us because 4-track made stereo mixes really tough. Everything was left, right, and center. There was very little nuances. And then, of course, 8-track came about a year and a half later, and then 16-track and 24-track, and eventually 48 tracks, and then finally Pro Tools, which is all digital, and we don't have to worry about tracks anymore, and don't have to worry about tape. So that's really an amazing leap.
Now,
and of course now that, now that the technology is there to do virtually anything you want, the radio business is all but dead. So, this is one of the great anomalies of our time.
did you find in the recording studio, did digital give you a freedom that you wish you had, or did you just grow?
Oh, we would have killed for that technology 40 years ago. We're making records now, it's just such a totally different experience. And of course, one of the great pluses, though, is that when you're done, you can literally from the studio email your record, your finished recording, to every radio station in the world with the push of a button.
Yeah.
And do away with all of the pressing of records and then the making of CDs, and you can do away with all that. everything is digital. So
Do you like that lack of the middleman, that you can somewhat sort of control
well, I
exactly
love
what's
it
going on?
in one way, but one of the things that I loved about the record business was thinking through the science of making a record. The mastering process was pretty awesome. You know, there were a lot of sciences that just don't exist anymore because it's all digital. So as far as ease, yes, I love it. I wouldn't trade now for anything.
The way you used effects back in the analog days, do you still use the effects the same way, or have you discovered?
Well, they're different too, because back in the day, you basically, if you wanted to make a sound wiggle, you had to build the circuitry yourself, and then synthesizers came along, and you could push a button. And now, most of the effects are built into the Pro Tools system. They're apps and plugins and add-ons to the Pro Tools that you can literally do anything. So I'm glad to have this stuff. It makes life a lot easier, but I do miss some of the old ways of doing things.
What about it do you miss?
Just the challenge of thinking it through, and how are we going to get this effect, and how are we going to do. Although, that's strictly my thing, because I'm old school in that way,
Have you gone to a digital pedal for your guitar yet? They make these multi-effects
No, that's one
pedals.
thing I really like to keep pretty. Now, my lead guitar player has every gadget known to man, but I like to pretty much have have the space that I've always had. I like to be able to do it myself, my way of playing guitar, and although I know a lot more on the guitar, I like to keep it simple.
With the advent of from analog, obviously it went from 8-track tapes to cassette tapes to on and on. Have you found that anything has become missing from the ease, or do you just say, thank God there's digital and on with life, or?
Well, digital has certainly made life a lot easier, and it has really allowed me as a songwriter and a producer to do things I could never do before. But also you have to control that. I mean, you still have to get it on a radio speaker to be heard, and you still have to condense everything down to this. So no matter how huge your production is, it still comes down to this.
Right.
And so that's always a reality.
Do you play vinyl at home still, or are you strictly digital?
I
You
love
do.
vinyl. I always have. I always will. But I always thought a CD disappearing in a drawer, miss some of the experience. But that's me, because I grew up with that.
Sure.